Доброе утро, дорогие друзья.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us,
Присутствует в зале.
everybody who's present in the hall.
Приветствую вас на нашем ключевом мероприятии, которое
Welcome to the
проходит
key
в
event
рамках Startup Village, которое
within the Startup Village,
в самом инновационном центре России.
which is located
Сейчас
in the
главное
most innovative center of Russia.
об открытии нашей конференции.
I would like to congratulate you on opening this conference.
К программе и первая сессия, которая будет в рамках этого мероприятия.
And the first session, which is going to be within our conference, is called Ecological Monitoring.
Не знаю, что первично, то ли углеродный след, то ли мониторинг, но точно сейчас уже всем понятно, что актуальность экологических проблем не оставляет ни обществу, ни индустрии.
It's quite obvious that the relevance of the ecological problems cannot be ignored.
На сегодняшний день мы видим ключевые
Currently, we can see the key trends. First of all, a more severity of the legislation, international and national, the increase of the expenditures of the state and the business on protecting the environment. We can see how the new markets are growing, the markets of waste disposal and emission control, and of course we can see that the information that is gathered and accumulated around this industry is becoming more and more relevant. The means which exist here and now, including the software, do not allow us to solve these tasks and to provide the development of these trends, which I have already mentioned right now. We can already see that the fast and mass implementation of informational system is required in order to provide the base to process the complex data for scientific analysis and forecasting of the ecological effects, and of course to have the transparent basis of the regulatory framework. During the session we're planning to discuss all of these problems at hand and to think of how to solve the tasks which lie ahead of us. The tasks are really complex and they have to be solved in a complex way. Definitely, as I see it, this cannot be done outside the framework of the science. And first of all, I would like to Dmitry Katalevsky, our main department of the industrial programs of Skoltech, to tell us what the scientific approaches are to solve the ecological problems fundamentally and how to monitor the situation in a more complex way. Good day, ladies and gentlemen, our listeners, everybody who is both online and offline. It's a great pleasure for me to be standing here on the stage. Indeed, Oleg touched upon a very important topic, and for quite some time it hasn't been more or less forgotten, but due to various reasons, right now it's becoming more relevant and prominent. And I think that the scientific life will be affected, and the economic life would be affected as well. I would like to discuss many things with you. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Thank you for gathering this very interesting panel. We'll have Rostelecom and Novolipetsk metallurgical plant, and I hope that we will have a very lively discussion here and now. I would like to speak a little bit about the energetic transference, and of course, while we mention it, we have to remember the carbon regulation and management. You might have noticed that starting from spring of last year, we have more and more messages about the carbon footprints, decarbonization, and the requirement to reduce CO2. What is the reason for that? Starting from 2019, Europe and other countries have started to discuss the law about the climate, the law based on which the European Union is decreasing the carbon footprint among all of the countries. The tendency has been growing for quite some time, and of course this climate law is going to touch upon both Europe and all the other countries, including ours. How exactly does it touch upon our country? EU carbon border tax has been introduced. This is a more or less customs fee for imported goods, and of course, we, the Russian Federation, are still a part of this process because we have a great connection of our experts to the EU. I'm talking about metallurgy, of hydrocarbons and many other things. Of course, by reducing their carbon footprints, the Europeans want their neighbors to decrease it. Right now, as far as we know, the internal legislation is being prepared. People are working very hard on preparing it, and I believe that this type of legislation is going to arise by the end of this year. Judging by various evaluations and assumptions, Boston company and of course the audit fore, big audit fore, are stating that exporters are losing up to 3 billion per year. The number which you can see, 22 billion per year of additional taxes to EU, could actually be lowered, and in fact it might be much higher. We have the trend on carbon transference, and we cannot get anywhere from it. This is a notion, a very wide notion, which is seen by us in Tech. Basically, this is an attempt to decrease the carbon footprint by changing the approach from the combustible energy sources to the energy efficient one. So economists like to speak about super trends and mega trends, and we believe that this is a super trend which is actually forming the other trends, including the scientific and technological ones. The demand of developing the renewable energy sources is rising. Of course, the accumulative energy is developing as well. The new cathode materials, hybrids, accumulators, electric transportation vehicles, one of the sub-trends of this big decarbonization, which has covered all the world. And of course, the transport is going to change, and it means that the economy of the cities is going to change, and of course consumption of electricity, the infrastructure is going to change drastically. But of course, new interesting technologies are arising. Great effort is being devoted to development of the hydro technologies. Of course, Europe is planning to shift to hydro technologies and hydrocarbon technologies. And of course, the monitoring of the emissions is also decreasing. Of course, the increase of the energy provision is rising. In banking, we'll see the green investment being developed, and of course, we know for sure that the leaders of the Russian banking are already working on performing these tasks, and they're discussing some of the tasks with us. In oil and gas, the mainstream is the technology of processing the CO2. Of course, we are working on the disposing of it and burying it, and we are developing the technologies of decreasing this. And of course, forest and climatic projects are very important. What I would like to say, multidisciplinarity is important to solve these tasks, and we are hoping that we are going to unite the work of universities and companies together to achieve this goal. I'm not going to stop for too long on this, but I would like to say that the new class of assets is arising. It has never existed before. This is an experimental class. The so-called hydrogen units, which is being sold in the markets. So in Europe, they have been existing for quite some time, and in the United States they already exist as well, and now it's going to be formed, and the whole system is going to be created on cooperation to provide the carbon units, and the companies which could not decrease their footprints are going to buy these carbon units in the stock markets. We do not know what the price will be because it is rising starting from this year, of course, about $50 per ton of the carbon unit. Some experts are forecasting growth up until $100 per ton. This is a new class of assets, and it's been giving birth to new types of projects. We call them climatic projects. Our colleagues have allowed me to show their diagram. This is an average terms of implementing the projects per year. So when they're showing what the price should be in order for it to return investments, you can see the large circles here. This is the potential of a reduction of the greenhouse effect emissions. We really hope that this type of projects is going to develop in Russia rapidly. We have great foundation for that, but there are many technological peculiarities due to that, and I will tell about it in more details a bit later. We do understand that something has to be done with this, and we have been working with the cluster of Oleg Dubnov and our industrial partners to form the distributed center of R&D facilities based on Skolkovo, Skoltech and industrial partners. We are open for cooperation, we are open for sharing our technologies, which could help our Russian companies to decrease the carbon footprint and to reduce the emissions. I'm not going to speak in lots of details about this chart. This is basically what Skoltech is here and now, and what we managed to do in 8 years of our work. So we are still young, 8 years. We have examples of transfer of technologies from different fields and industries up until their scaling. Oil and gas, electrochemistry, 5G and so on. And carbon footprint should be in the lower bottom part, and it's still prototyping and we're still gathering the experience of using it. A couple of more details about the projects which are comprising this whole topic. 3 more slides, let me take up some more time. First of all, this is for the people who have great amounts of utilizing and wasting the CO2, disposing of CO2. We have the tools which are helping us to bury the footprints in the geological plains. So we have already created a simulator how to develop this project. We are developing it together. So this is all about the environmental oil service. Optimization of good oil recovery and optimization which would help us to reduce the amount of chemicals which go into the ground and ruin the nature, to minimize this negative effect on the environment. It might be surprising, but we have the digital twin of the forest. This is not a new technology. This is a technology which is developing. So this is a taxation of the forest to evaluate the types of trees, the species of trees and their age. This is going to be required in forest and eco projects, which require the monitoring of forest resources and recalculation into biomass, and to calculate the carbon unit which is consumed by it. We have first companies which are joining us, City Air company, for example, which is monitoring the emissions and the quality of the environmental air. Because we are talking about sequestering of CO2 emissions, but also we are talking about our own understanding of the air, because we as people have to consume quality air, quality water, and we have to maintain the balance in the nature. We can see that many young companies are arising, and the matters which are comprising this whole complex topic is, of course, online monitoring and management of the resources. This is very serious and very interesting. Of course, if we're talking about the monitoring of emissions and other disasters, this is not a new topic. So we are forecasting the arisal of special platforms which are managing the carbon footprints on the level of various industries and companies. We believe that a special system should arise in order to connect and unite these elements. And the last thing, we're going back to the old topics. Some of them are relatively new, but anyhow, we feel like we will see that the digital twins of the energy facilities are going to be created. Smart grids and other things which allow to dedicate fewer efforts to consume energy, to create buffers, to reserve energy. And of course, this is a very important and very interesting topic. So this is energy management, a very interesting topic. It deserves more time to discuss. But anyhow, I would like to say that we are planning to dedicate our time to it. Dear colleagues, that's it from me. Do you have any questions? Yes, thank you very much, Dmitry. You almost managed to fit in the timeline which we gave you, and we do understand that the scientific community has sometimes troubles to stick it with these time frames, especially if we're talking about such big topics. But I would like to ask about the vision of Skoltech and your personal vision in this field. In one of the slides, we could see several parts, the big ones, and you said that it's the view of Skoltech. You called the slide like this. One of the blocks, one of the parts is eco-monitoring. Of course, implementing other ones is also dependent on this one, because we need to evaluate things, we need to gather data, we need to understand how the emissions are increasing or decreasing. Tell us, where should the foundation of this work be in this particular situation? Should it be the state regulations or over the state, something outside the state? So who has to create the standards in order to maintain the eco-monitoring? I think that we need to do it together with the government. And of course, they have to listen to business and to scientific community, how things should be done. The reaction of the state is more or less one and the same, and usually it's a bit delayed. Business feels these turbulences first, and then science goes along with the business. And of course, at some point, state is going to join in this process of creating the proper regulations. I really hope that it's going to have a council with the consumers and scientific and business sectors. Will it be... But what do you think about the international pressure? Well, of course, it exists, and the carbon footprint is basically the tool of this international pressure. So, if you want to deliver things to our countries, you have to do the calculation of your carbon footprint, and if you do not do that, then you should pay the tax for that. This process exists here and now, and of course, it accelerates the processes, which could be slower than they are here and now. Are we talking about internal or external policy? External pressure is accelerating the internal solutions. Okay, I believe that Pavel Shilyaev is going to tell a bit more about it. The director of Office of Integrated Solutions of Rostelecom. The company is very active in the field of eco-monitoring, and I believe that Pavel is going to tell us why they started doing this, why Rostelecom, and where they are now and where they are going.
Greetings, Oleg. So, which is quite a convenient and habitual format for us when we have a combination of offline and online. So that was an excellent introduction. And to carbon footprint, I would like to have two parts in my presentation. Firstly, we have our own internal regulation related to environmental monitoring and providing data following all the agreements we signed and presidential decrees. And also we have categories for facilities and sites. And we have our own domestic agenda. We have different categories. First category of sites with negative impact on the environment, with automated devices that should be installed there. And things are not yet clear on them. There's another task that we work on, and it came from the idea of a safe city. So we work with EMERCOM at the federal and local levels. So the idea is to do environmental monitoring in a comprehensive way to account for negative impacts, emissions of harmful gases or chemicals their discharge into water. About 12 Russian territories have implemented that, and we were developing this platform back in 2014. There was a demand for it. Automation was done in different ways. We were monitoring spring flooding. We used video analytics that showed a ruler that was stuck in the ground and showed the water level. Then we modernized that. We installed sensors with double controls, but in some regions they still use those rulers because that was a way to get those numbers. If we come back to environmental monitoring, primarily it should be noted that demand comes from ourselves because we want to know what kind of air we are breathing when we buy an apartment, a new apartment, or an area where we're going to live. We want to know about the environmental situation there, and that data can be monetized, but so far it has not really worked. Because you need to have measurement devices in place, and you need to have, as somebody can tell you, those are not properly certified, etc. So it's not like everybody really needs that data, as it turns out in life. So if we take one platform that collects those reference data, and we use some measurement devices for that, then on the other end we have a large platform that provides access to all the participants, to those who are supposed to comply with those rules. So this is a top-level platform that can be done, and we have done it. So if you would like to share data, it's possible. Just a few clarifications on what Dmitry said. He said that if you have business, things are moving faster, and cross-border tax and regulation, they already have impact on businesses. They calculate what kind of burden and tax burden they may have, but science is perhaps the best place for applicable research and projects, because that methodology of calculation in June for border regulation in EU, it should be approved in June, from what I hear, the first guidelines. So the way you calculate it will impact it. You know how much you will pay for it. So the proper methodology, proper calculation, accounting and calculation by countries, and also you talked also about digital twins of forests, which is a really cool thing. So, which is a way for us to convince the European Union that our contribution of our forests to capturing CO2 is a very major. So we do hope for it, that they will consider how much CO2 is captured by our forests. So this business should be properly developed technologically in terms of energy efficiency, installation of automation components, but without science, without methodology, without that foundation, all of that will be futile. So most likely, ecology is about all the other areas. So we used to talk about digitalization. We said digitalization covers everything: industry, agriculture, medicine, etc. So now we talk about ecology, and it covers pretty much all the areas. So, and we should join our efforts when we deal with this topic, because we talk about carbon footprint and in its consequences for the economy, and energy efficiency measures should change a lot. But if we put it in monetary terms and develop investment programs, that can be something for them. So I have a proposal for Skoltech colleagues, because they are aware of this topic, they work with it. So we need to be in dialogue with the major producers, with companies that have major carbon footprints, and those who are planning to implement digital platforms. So we should talk to them and find some common points of growth. And so I wanted to be on time in my speech. Thank you very much for that. Dmitry grabbed the microphone. He said, "Okay, we are ready to sign with you any kind of agreement." From what I hear, is it true? Yeah, of course we are willing to work together. So there's this pressure, and we should respond to it. We should do it together. Thank you for that, Dmitry. I have some clarifying question for you, Pavel. Oh, Pavel is gone. How come? Is he still there? Good. So we cannot see you anymore. Okay, there you are. You already invested some funds, and you developed a software product, or maybe completed development of a previous software product to collect and data and analyze data for environmental monitoring, as you said. At the same time, in your presentation, you mentioned that only in June 1st regulations will be adopted at that interstate level, so which will be a starting point for developing a program of scientific research. And so maybe you're getting ahead of yourself when you are spending money on developing these products before you know what methodology will be like. Thank you for this question. It's a very good question. So financial people oftentimes ask us about that. Why do you spend money before you know what regulation will be like? I should say that development of this platform that collects the data, so it was done during some measures for comprehensive monitoring of environment. So we were collecting that data, we put it all together. So that was a development of internal, in response to internal demand, domestic demand. It's still there. So it was not done specifically for what European Union will require, because our ministry asked to collect the data back in 2014, so that we were ahead of our European colleagues in that respect. Okay, I see Pavel. So Nikita Vorobyov from NLMK, who is head of the environmental department, so he will tell us if companies have demand for these products and in design. So Nikita, are you there? Yes, hello. Good morning, colleagues. Can you see me? Yeah. I'm very happy to see you all here and discuss this topic of great relevance. So when we deal with environmental monitoring, you see, So environment and climate are part of my position. So there's some relation between them, but there are two main topics. We have environmental impact that happens locally, normally, so in our production sites where we operate, and we have climate problem, which is more global. So, and the Paris Agreement aimed at it, and in all those international efforts. And basically, our monitoring methods are somewhat different when we deal with those two. So there is a standard way to assess our carbon footprint. So we do it through carbon balance, where we compare carbon input and carbon output, and we calculate total emissions. So this way requires some complicated calculations and lab analysis, but online monitoring is not required for it. So, but it is needed for environmental issues. So let me show how it works. I will try to be very brief. Can you see that, colleagues?
Пока не видно.
Not yet. So, will it work? Yeah. Let me know when you can see it. Okay, let me start. In any case, yeah, we can see it, Nikita. Wonderful. So, just a few words about our company. You are familiar with NLMK. We're one of the largest steel producer in Russia. And when we talk about environment and protecting it, over 35% of steel is produced from scrap metal. And if we talk about carbon or carbon transition, we will not only reduce our carbon footprint, but we also want to make sure that our consumers using new products have smaller emissions of greenhouse gases. 33.5 million tons per year of reduced CO2 that's the result. Talking of monitoring and all the things that we do to measure our activities and our impact on the sites of our presence. Last year, we commissioned a system of video monitoring which works 24/7 with 60 cameras. So they monitor all the key sources of emissions of our plants. So they're located both at the plant itself and also in the city around, because we need to see a larger picture of what is happening. Here's what we did. So we provided access to that video footing to our production colleagues for them to be able to watch what's going on with their activities from the outside, how it is seen. So if you work in the furnace, if you're a metal steel making worker, you don't know what it looks from the outside. So if there is some smoke, which is not usual, so they are able to see it now immediately. Also, we are in the process of implementing computer vision for our key emitters, so to automate that process. Also for our furnaces, we achieved a lot of results, over 99% of computer vision systems were able to identify those deviations. You can see here on the screen some of the examples of what it looks like. So orange smoke when it appears, so it's a deviation. So from there we can go to analyze root cause, so we can exclude some of these scenarios, and then we can involve the proper personnel, proper people to analyze the situation. Moreover, it makes it possible for us, for problem emissions sites, to create special working groups, those floors to develop special measures if it's a systemic problem, or else to transition to implementation of necessary measures. So if we see that there's a failure or something, we need to replace that piece of equipment, so we order it. So which is a major factor? The analysis and monitoring, they seem to be simple, but they make it possible to draw attention of our production personnel to what is happening with our air emissions. And secondly, we think about the reasons and look for root causes. When we talk about monitoring and analysis, we also take regular measurements throughout all of the territory and protection area around the site. And also we do that in the city from the end of 2019. We take 3 measurements per day, and we evaluate our impact by taking those measures manually, even though we do it also automatically. So that manual taking of samples, of measurements, is followed by analysis and assessment of our impact. But in and of itself, it doesn't tell you what happened there. So we developed a piece of software, which was verified by Voyekova Institute, which is one of the leading institutions in metallurgy, that helped us to see what our contribution is to concentration of various substances in the air. And we can monitor how our levels, you see those blue columns on this slide, how they are different from the levels in the city, so where our impact is present, and it can be minimal, and we see our contribution to those levels, to air concentration of those substances. And then we install automatic systems. We already tested 4 of them last year with our Skalkova colleagues. They provided various solutions which we tested, and we tested them on our site. So this year we will be upscaling them in Lipetsk and elsewhere on our sites. So we'll be collecting information and evaluating our impact, which is a very important tool for communications as well. I told you about internal communications with our production personnel, but just as important is our communications with local people, those who live in the city, about those measurements of atmospheric air. So in the nearest future, we'll be publishing regularly the data, but when it's automated, information will be provided online, and every inhabitant will have access to it. So in a nutshell, colleagues, that's what I wanted to share with you with regard to monitoring. It's very important for us not just to watch it, to monitor it, but we need to predict it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikita. I believe that in the nearest future, you will have more stakeholders, as you call them, who are going to be interested in this technology. And quite probably, They won't be located in the Russian Federation. We all do understand that. And they're going to require specific data, verified data, and so on and so forth. It's a great thing that you do understand this. And another question which I asked to Pavel. So, do people ask the same question as they asked Pavel, so that we will need to install 150 cameras, connect them, and give the information back? Is it relevant to you? Well, once again, we have lots of stakeholders. Of course, we are a public company, and we have more than 60,000 shareholders, and some of them are really asking those questions if we're talking about the environmental issues and the carbon footprint. I have been telling about it as well, and we are publishing it in our yearly reports. And of course, our European regulators and consumers are also involved in this process. Quite often, the consumers are becoming even more important to us, because quite often we have to discuss things with our buyers in Europe, and we have to tell them about the carbon footprint and our efforts in this regard. And of course, we discuss many eco matters with them. If we talk about the internal solutions, they are simpler. So the management does understand why we do things and why we have various requests. Nikita, that's quite clear, thank you. I have some questions to you, but I think that we either should keep them for a later discussion for it to be more interesting. And I would actually want to ask you to prepare yourself to answer to one of the questions. So if we're talking about your place in the world in the field of producing this steel, I would like to ask you, so what is the level of your emissions as well? So we haven't seen it in these slides, and I think that you still can have some clarification on that, and you can speak about this evaluation. So, of course, it's quite obvious that the science and the developers are all interested in all the topics which you have been talking about. And, of course, we can see the interest of the most drastic polluters, so to say. And, of course, Dmitry has started to speak about Skoltech and Skolkovo, how a similar project is being implemented, how it has started to develop. And I would like to say a couple of words, ask Alla Kirsanova to tell a couple of words about the project which is being done here and now and where you are now. Good day, dear colleagues. Thank you very much, Oleg. Couple of words. No, this is the wrong presentation. Please open the one which I gave to you in the center. Well, in a nutshell, what Dmitry has been talking about, he said that a market or carbon market is being formed, and the carbon footprint is being sold, bought, and resold. But we believe that an eco-info market is also forming. We can see the demand, first of all, but of course it's the socium and the people who are forming it, and of course the state regulators are creating this great demand as well. And the third party which is forming it is the representative companies like Nikita. They have to prove their eco-friendliness and their eco-responsibilities. What can be done by Skolkovo in this case? We, as the Institute of Development, we understood that our role would be an intermediate one. We should be the organizers of this process, because we can become a platform to unify the efforts. Because everybody sees that it's hard to do such things on their own. We're talking about science, we're talking about digital companies, we're talking about methodologies, various creators of rule, state as a regulator, industrial companies, as the future customers who are going to create specifications for scientific research. We, as an Institute of Development, see our task as experts because we are already the points of attraction of a great amount of leading experts, and we can help the companies to get rid of inefficient solutions and to help them to choose the best focus of developments thanks to our expertise. And the third important task is the participation in the forming of new relevant agenda for the state regulators in order to refresh the normative and regulatory base. We in Skolkovo view ecologic monitoring in a wider scale compared to what is seen by our colleagues. We can see the sociological effect, the migration, the longevity, the forecasting power of the eco platform, which is going to allow us to make a more specific evaluation of the investment projects. Well, of course, climate has to be studied more and more, but the forecasting importance of this information is becoming more and more relevant. And of course, I would like to speak about commercialization of this volume of data. We really hope that this platform solution is going to be ordered and is going to have some order. Of course, we're talking about the stock market of the data. Lots of developers and scientists and companies and state and public organizations can be the vendors of this data, and of course they can be the buyers of this data. Secondly, this is a platform to sell the solutions. Various technological solutions, like the ones which have been described by Pavel Shilhev, like Rostelecom developments. Thirdly, we can see the commercialization. So because we will need a Russian national platform which is going to be evaluating the situation using a more and much wider set of data to evaluate the influence on the ecology and the environment, how it's going to affect our future. And of course, everything has to be in favor of our children and our future. This is a very beautiful and high note, so to say, and I would like to use this platform to tell the following. In capsule number 3, we are still going to work together. At 11:30, we will have a big forum on eco-monitoring. This is going to be an international discussion with the biggest Finnish, German, Japanese and Chinese companies. They are going to tell us about their technological solutions, and at 2 p.m. we'll have a pitch session on eco-monitoring. If you're interested, please join us. This is all a part of the project because we are solving a task of creating and drawing up this puzzle and to fit it perfectly, to look at things which exist here and now and which have to be created. Yes, by the way, I forgot to tell you that the eco topic is consisting of 3 parts. This is more of even forum. Thank you very much, Allah, for organizing this whole thing. We managed to maintain it on one and the same platform on the territory of Innovation Center. 2 events are going to take place in the Technopark, and please join us. I'm sure that there will be a possibility to join us online and offline, so you can use your devices or your workspaces to do that. Thank you very much for that. Our session is almost over. I can see the messages about it. We have 2 questions from the audience hall. One is rather narrow. We will definitely answer it. The question is to Nikita Vorobyov. in the address of Novolipetsky plant. And another one is to Dmitry Katalevsky. How efficient will the eco-monitoring be? It's a very general question, I believe, so it's all about the whole topic, end-to-end question, I would like to say. Could you please answer it in short? Thank you very much, Oleg. Thank you very much for your question. Well, to say it in a most concise way, everything will be very efficient. We have two trends. First one is digitalization, and the second one is ecologization. And the number, and this can make the process most transparent. The monitoring is becoming first transparent, second available. Today, we, as private entities, can install sensors in our houses to see what is happening with the air, with the emissions, with the pollution. And it's a great thing that right now the manufacturers and production facilities are implementing the systems here and now. This is the experience of an LMK. Of course, we are increasing the availability and the accuracy of these sensors. Very soon, we will buy houses and apartments with detailed information about its location, about the winds, about the pollution in the territory, if there are some. Thank you very much for this question. I'm really confident that everything will be simpler and lighter and more interesting and more detailed. I'm pretty sure that we'll have another session about it on the open innovations, and it's going to be in about half a year, and Ala already knows whom she wants to invite there. Definitely we will have state authorities joining the discussion, who will be talking about the regulation on the state level. I'm pretty sure that we will have to invite people from the inter-state bodies who are going to be responsible for taking action, methodologists, and many more people. This is a very complex situation, indeed. Thank you very much for answering our call and keeping answering our calls to join in the discussion. And I'm pretty sure that in half a year we will be able to speak about some real actions which have been taken in this field. They are becoming more and more obvious. Thank you very much for joining in today, for joining in the discussion of today's session. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time, so I have already several messages about it, and we can already hear the sounds which are reminding us about the end of the session. Please ask your questions in the chat, send us questions in your emails. Welcome to our mutual work. Thank you very much.
веселья, жажда путешествий, жажда общения. Утоляй любую жажду с освежающими вкусами Липтон. Мой любимый персик.
При низких температурах окружающей среды тела быстро теряют энергию. Но нахождение вблизи источника тепла позволяет телу получать тепловое излучение. Происходит самопроизвольное перераспределение тепла. Следовательно, когда источники тепла находятся вместе, их энергия побеждает холод. Лучшее создается вместе. Газпромбанк.
МТС Стартап Хаб. Работа с реальным бизнес-заказчиком МТС. Доступ к ресурсам самого крупного телеком-бренда в России. Не можешь поверить? А в твой стартап обязательно поверят. У нас есть все, что тебе понадобится. Ресурсы, клиенты, технологии, каналы продаж. Мы оценим твой продукт, правильно применим в своем бизнесе и масштабируем на мировой рынок. МТС Стартап Хаб ждет тебя и твоих нереальных бизнес-идей.
Дорогие зрители и участники, технологические стартапы и предприниматели, подобно космическим метеорам и кометам, разрезают пространство и время, преодолевая миллиарды парсеков сквозь звездные ветра, туманы протозвездного вещества, притяжение черных дыр, вспышки сверхновых и ловушки темной материи, стремятся выйти на все более высокую орбиту.
The startups are growing faster and faster to change the world around them. Startup Village 2021 is dedicated to the flight of Yuri Gagarin, which was a breakthrough of humankind into space. The significance is greater than can be seen, both for studying the space and the development of science and technologies, which is obvious. The penetration of space is expanding our understanding and, of course, enriches our science and culture. Digital materials, the ascension on the border to the world. Creation of new materials has been and remains one of the greatest achievements of all times, as new materials have played a crucial role in the growth, welfare, safety and quality of human life from the beginning of times until today. The best practices of creating new materials can the modeling and machine education and studying accelerate the speed of entering the market, do the development of engineering affect the new business models. We will discuss it during the session. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Digital and Materials session is commencing. As if the way we're sitting is going to affect the result. We're starting the session, Digital and Materials. Okay, we can start, yes? Great. Dear colleagues, we are starting this session, Digital and Materials, at the boundary between the two worlds. My name is Alexander Fertman. I'm the Director on Science and Technologies and Education of Skolkovo. Our experts, Alexander Oleg Lysak, Director General of 10 Group, Anton Ryzantsev, Director General and founder of many companies, including the CTO company in Novosibirsk, and Professor of Skolkovo Institute of Science and Technologies, Alexander Karsunsky. Good day. Good day, dear colleagues who are here with us, dear colleagues who are online with us. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most relevant topics here and now. Everybody is involved in digitalization, as if material world has disappeared, but materials are still here and now. Everything which surrounds us is made of materials. The initial materials, the ones which we are used to, metals, wood, polymers. Also, we're talking about recycled materials. Right beside us, on the Startup Bazaar, we can see great examples of what can be done using the wastes. But the field and industry of the materials has been fighting against the digitalization for quite some time. I have been speaking to material experts, and they have been talking about the fact that new materials have been existing for 15-20 years, and new materials aren't going to be created. But digitalization is obvious, and during the last years we could already see that there is another field which was included by Luke's research into the list, a short list of the world trends. Material informatics, that's the list. How the digits are living alongside the materials and the products made of materials, how it lives inside the material world. Can we accelerate the development of materials? What are the trends in the field of materials and how digitalization affects them? I would like to ask Professor Korsunsky to start. Thank you, Alexander. This is a very interesting